So I've been on a Fujifilm kick lately because I wanted to know what makes them so expensive and why do they retain their value much better than most other cameras of the likes today. So for our camera classic, we are out and about enjoying the last slivers of sunlight we have on this cold Duluth day with the Fujifilm X10. My first impressions of the body right out of the gate, it feels awesome in my hands. It feels like an old rangefinder style camera. Beyond that, it feels solid with a nice grip, and I really like that you wake it up by just twisting the lens. That brings me to my next point. You have to crank it to zoom in and out, and what's nice is it also has an optical viewfinder, which, you know, divides a lot of people today, but back then there were used to these old low quality EVFs. A lot of people of 2011 preferred optical viewfinders, and even today. So if you're looking for a point and shoot camera with that, this has it in spades. I mean, you don't get any kind of information on this OVF other than it does zoom when the lens does. The Fujifilm X10 sports a 2/3 inch 12 megapixel sensor, and it came out in 2011. Now don't quote me on this, but this is around the time, more or less, that camera manufacturers were making the switch from CCD to CMOS. Fujifilm did what Fujifilm always does, they moved the goalposts, put in the X-Trans sensor within this camera. And it comes out with some tack-sharp imaging in colors that you won't see on any other CMOS sensor. I find this 28 to 112mm zoom range on the X10 very handy, and I also like the fact that you have to hand crank it. It gives me a sense of security that it's probably not going to fail or break in the future, much like power zooms or whatever other point and shoots use. And to me, that's another one up that this camera has over, say, the X100 because it zooms. So it is very cold out here. I think I'm going to call it an evening. Maybe we'll get out another day with the Fujifilm, but the batteries are dying and I am as well. So let's take the Sketchaway home and maybe get some nice street photos, or try without getting mugged. I was out here last night with the X10 doing some long exposures, and I noticed a few things worth mentioning about the camera. First and foremost, it doesn't like cold weather. Fair play, it is an old compact camera. More importantly, when I was trying to adjust my shutter speed, I noticed that if I tried to bump my ISO, I wasn't able to drag out the shutter like I wanted to for long exposures. That's a little disappointing because that kind of limits me in my night photography. It's not an issue that I'd run into a lot, and if it is that important, I'll just bring a different camera. But it's a bit of a letdown, especially because this would make a great all-in-one unit, but it is a compact camera at the end of the day. We're back at the house, and after reviewing the images, I'd just like to say, of course, the X10 takes great shots. However, I was surprised at both how much detail and dynamic range I was able to get with the X10. I mean, I didn't set my expectations incredibly high because it's a decade-old compact camera with a 2/3 inch sensor. But in retrospect, of course the images are pristine because, well, there's a sharp lens on this and it's an X-Trans sensor. Beyond that, the X10 has a lot of different dynamic range modes built within the camera, most notably within the ISO settings where you can pull more when needed. If we talk more about the internals, the camera has a high frame rate mode of 7 shots per second, which is great for street shooting. Furthermore, if we look at it compared to the X100, it is considerably smaller and it can actually fit in your pocket, unlike modern alleged pocket cameras you see on the market. Now, some downsides with the internals, again, those issues I had with doing some long exposures at night, not being able to boost my ISO and still use a slow shutter speed. It's not an issue that I have a lot, but it's there. And also just worth noting that sometimes the raw mode can be hard to find. It can get lost in the menus. I looked on message boards. I wasn't the only person with this problem. It's not that you lose it, but it just gets mucked up in the menu somewhere. It's there. You're likely smarter with this camera than I am because you might be a Fujifilm fanboy. Now the externals. This is one of my favorite cameras that I've held in a very long time. Again, because it's a good street shooting camera. It's a lot smaller than the X100. It has a nice zoom range with a sharp lens that's also bright, starting at f2 and going to f2.2. Just know that at its widest, there is a little bit of barrel distortion, but it could be fixed in post-production. I kind of like it because it gives it some personality. I also do like the optical viewfinder. I mean, sure, it doesn't show you any of your settings, but it does zoom in when you zoom the lens. When you hold this body, it just feels so premium in your hands, being that it's magnesium alloy like its bigger brother. I also like having the exposure compensation dial at the top. It reminds me of my Generation 2 Sony cameras. It's just easy to flip and switch when needed. If I could have added anything to this camera body, it would be a nice custom ring at the front where I could change some more settings in manual shooting instead of using this dial or this one. It's also worth noting that there's a built-in flash. It's cute. It's right on the top right there. And a hot shoe would need it. The colors are nice on this old X10 and the JPEGs edit very, very well. I know Fujifilm says that they have the best JPEGs in the business, and I tend to agree with them. So if we're going full circle, most of my issues were shooting with raw or manual modes in the X10. That said, when I use this camera, I'm generally going to one-handed or use it in aperture or shutter priority as a street camera. Furthermore, because I'm such a big fan of the JPEGs in the X10, I don't see why I wouldn't just shoot it JPEG only with the film simulations overlaid. Now, I'm not a Fujifilm expert by any means, so if you use an X10 or a Fujifilm of the likes, leave a comment below which simulations are your favorite and how you tweak them both in camera or post-production when you use them. So all these considered, the X10 is a phenomenal camera, and before I used it, I wondered why a 12 megapixel camera from a decade ago is still running at $400 to $600 on the used market, but after picking one up, I can just feel why. It's a premium compact camera with a great zoom lens, awesome features to keep anyone of any skill set, whether you're a beginner, prosumer, or a professional shooter. It'll keep you satisfied, satiated for years to come. So that's it for now. Subscribe to Matt's Notes on Instagram to see images shot with this Fujifilm camera. We're going to go over this one in the near future too. Thank you for watching. Say goodnight to Toby, and I will see you next time.